Exactly 100 days passed since the beginning of this war. And today, in addition to my regular daily news reporting, I want to also briefly summarize the major results and events that happened during that time. So, what was the original, long-forgotten goal of Russia? What both countries of Russia and Ukraine were able to achieve during this time? What will the future of this war look like? And these are the questions that I'll be talking about in today's video. What's up, investors? Theodore Ott and people of Reddit, it's the Russian Dude, and this is your daily update on Russian-Ukrainian war as of Friday, June 3rd. You can see the main events of the day to my right, along with the timestamps. Happy Friday, everyone! Today is exactly 100th day anniversary of this war between Russia and Ukraine, which started on February 24th, 2022. And on this map you can see exactly how the map of the war has been changing since the very beginning all the way until today, June 3rd. And right now, I'll be summarizing all the major news and events that happened during these 3 months. And in addition to that, I'll present my assumption how I think the future of the war will look like. Alright, so first of all, what was the original goal of Russia of this war? And yes, I know that the goals have been constantly changing, but one of the original ones was, first of all, is to prevent the spread of NATO, and second was to liberate the Donbass region and to denazify Ukraine. The reason why would Russia even attack Ukraine, it is because Russia claimed that Ukrainians were killing Ukrainians in this Donbass region since 2014. And Russia basically came to Ukraine to protect these Ukrainians. Another reason for the invasion, it is because Ukraine intended to join NATO, which was bringing the alliance close to the borders with Russia. And finally, Russian intelligence services somehow discovered that the entire country of Ukraine is full of Nazis. That is why Russia obviously had to denazify Ukraine, and that is why they invaded basically everywhere around the country. Since the beginning of this war, Russia was able to capture more than 3,000 cities, towns and villages. And 100 later, Ukrainian forces liberated at least 1/3 of them. It is also estimated that during these 3 months, Russia has lost more than 30,000 soldiers, which is more soldiers that Soviets lost during their Afghan wars, which lasted for 10 years. The war started very unexpectedly and almost no one saw it coming. And that is why Russia was able to advance so much during the first couple of weeks of the war from the north, south and east of the country. But eventually Ukrainians realized what's happening and Western countries started sending their support. And because of this, the advancement of Russian forces slowed down significantly. The first region which was able to be liberated was the north of Ukraine. And eventually Ukrainian forces were able to sink Russian Black Sea Navy flagship Moskva in the middle of April, which made the liberation of the south of the country so much easier. Because one of the main goals of this ship was to provide the fire support for Russian paratroopers which were supposed to land in the south of Ukraine. Because of this, Ukrainian forces started slowly taking back the control over the south. And Russia decided to switch their attention mainly to the city of Mariupol and Donbass region. The entire city of Mariupol was eventually occupied by Russian forces except one small territory of Azov-style factory. And this is where the last remaining Azov battalion Ukrainian soldiers were hiding and trying to resist Russian invaders. Eventually, higher government officials of Ukraine gave them an order to save their lives. That is why these people surrendered. And because of this, Russia was able to take full control over the city of Mariupol. And so at this very moment, one of the last Russian goals in this war is to gain the control over the region of Donbass. But they saw that the region is pretty big, that is why they decided to focus just on smaller part of it, which is the Luhansk region. And until recently they were relatively successful in this territory and they were even able to capture the city of Severodonetsk. Until we all realized that this was a genius plan of Ukrainian forces all along. They deliberately surrendered the city of Severodonetsk so they can later trap Russian army. And in addition to that, Russian forces were relocating its forces from everywhere around the country just to the east of Ukraine, which made the south of the country to be less protected. And so, as a result of this genius maneuver, Ukrainians are now having much easier times at liberating the south of their own country, and also now they're launching counter-offensive in Luhansk region. It is also worth mentioning that all this were able to be done by Ukrainian army before they had enough offensive weapons from the west, which at this very moment are still just being transported to Ukraine. And the majority of these weapons come come from the Land-Lease Act signed by President Biden on May 9th, which basically allows America to send weapons to Ukraine much faster and much cheaper. And so it has been reported by the advisor to the President of Ukraine, Alexei Arestovich, that Ukraine will be accumulating these offensive weapons somewhere until the middle of this summer. And then Arestovich hopes that after they have enough offensive weapons, this is when Ukraine will start launching even more successful counterattacks. And no matter in which direction this war will go in the nearest future, I will be always here to report it for you. And by the way, if you like this style of daily news reporting, feel free to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Also, please make sure to check the link in the description if you wish to receive additional content such as daily Zoom calls and Q&A sessions. All the proceeds will be donated to Ukraine at the end of each month. Thanks so much, and let's continue. Welcome to another episode of Ridiculous Russian Propaganda. And today we're going to talk about this Western article which talks about the son of President Zelensky giving him military advice. I mean, obviously every president has his or her own advisors who he or she listens to. And each decision is carefully weighed and taken in the agreement by multiple people. I guess this is just common sense level of understanding. But not if you are Russian propaganda. So Russian propaganda took this article and they started showing this everywhere. And the main narrative was basically something like this. Oh, okay, it's no wonder Zelensky is taking such stupid decisions. It will be just a matter of time before Ukraine collapses. Or something like this. Oh, how it is surprising that the ex-clown takes the advice from his kid to rule the country. And the next episode of Ridiculous Russian Propaganda is the statement by Russian politician Alexander Hinstein. So, technically, all the politicians in Russia must go through this mandatory annual military trainings. They last only like 3-4 days and it is only to refresh the basics of military-related things. And so, the next annual military trainings for Russian politicians were supposed to happen between June 7th and June 10th. But technically right now Russia is in the state of war, which basically means that in case needed, these politicians can be drafted into the army. And so Alexander Hinstein went ahead and said, let's postpone this military training. So as you can see, it's like, yes, we need to send as many Russians to this special military operation in Ukraine, but as long as it's not us. Russia needs us way more than regular Russians. And so we're just gonna stay here safe and sound, promote patriotism and say how much we want to denazify Ukraine. But it will be you, regular Russians, who will be doing our will. And I just hope many more Russians will realize this thing as soon as possible. So, if you remember my previous video, I was talking about this mind-blowing 3000 IQ plan by Ukrainian forces about liberating the Lugansk region. What this basically means is that the Ukrainian army fakes surrender the city of Severodonetsk so that they can later trap the Russian forces. But before this, Ukrainian army was showing significant resistance, which made the Russian army to reallocate its forces into this eastern region. So because of this, the population of Russian army in the south of the country decreased significantly, which allowed Ukrainian army to start liberating the south of Ukraine. And now the Russian forces are trapped in the city of Severodonetsk, which is geographically lower than the city of Lysychansk, where the majority of Ukrainian forces are. And because of these geographic reasons, Ukrainian army now has a military advantage. And today, the governor of Lugansk region, Sergei Gaidai, reported that Ukrainian forces were already able to liberate approximately 20% of Severodonetsk city, which just shows you how brilliant this plan was since the beginning. Today, the ex-president of Russia made several very interesting statements, and just for you, I combined the best 3 ones. First of all, he was obviously justifying this special military operation. And he said that because it is called special military operation, the only things that Russian army is destroying are military objects. That's exactly how he said this. The second thing he said is that Finland and Sweden joining NATO possess less threat than if Ukraine joins NATO. What he basically means here is that Russia has some kind of influence on Ukraine joining NATO or not. But Sweden and Finland are culturally relatively far countries from Russia, that is why Russia does not have such influence on these countries. So if you remember in the past, Russia was threatening Sweden and Finland that in case you join NATO, we will take precautious measures. measures. But now Russia realized that everyone discovered they're bluffing and that they cannot do anything. So because of this, their narrative has always changed. And now instead of threatening Sweden and Finland, they're saying, well, that's okay, they do not possess that much threat. So it's okay if they join, we kinda don't care. And the final statement of Dmitry Medvedev, which is an extremely contradictive statement. He first goes on and says that nuclear war is absolutely unacceptable and we must do everything to prevent this from happening. And then literally in the next sentence he proceeds by saying that in case there are attacks against the territory of Russia, the response of Russia will be immediate and horrible, and Russia will not care about the future fate of the humanity. I mean, all these things, they obviously do sound horrible, and the only reason I'm smiling it is because this is not the first and most likely not the last nuclear threat by Russia, which makes it pretty clear at this point basically to everyone that this is just a bluff. And another very important thing that I just learned recently is that physically Russia cannot send nuclear attacks first. The only way to activate nuclear defense and countermeasure system in Russia is whenever there are nuclear missiles are already heading towards Russia, which basically means that Russia will not be able to launch nuclear missiles first, they can only respond to the nuclear attack. One of the major events of this war happened in the middle of April, where Ukrainian forces sunk the Russian Navy flagship Moskva. The position of Russia hasn't changed since then, and the reason for the sunkage of this ship was because someone did not put out their cigarette, which created the fire. And so just by looking at this example, you can already guess that the Ministry of Defense of Russia will try to hide as many details about this ship as possible, which also includes all the people who died and their personal information. But obviously if you had a family member who died on this ship, you will not just give up that easy. So there is this father, Dmitry Medvedev, who wanted to get the truth about his dead son. He started digging deep and eventually started exposing the truth about the sunken ship, which obviously means that the Ministry of Defense of Russia did not like this and they tried to shut down this guy as much as possible. And so recently he came into public eye once again and he mentioned that there were several policemen who came to his apartment and they were trying to prosecute him as a terrorist. They were basically saying that he was spreading fake news about Russian army and they confiscated his laptop. But at the same time, this father, Dmitry Medvedev, he realized that these police guys, they were doing this against their own will. They were basically apologizing and saying that they just have to do this, which kinda gives you the idea of the status of censorship and the free speech in Russia. So I guess it means if one of your relatives dies in war, you have just to give up and say, okay, this was for Russia. But in case if you want to get some answers from the politicians or get some compensation or get at least some kind of truth, you immediately become a terrorist. And then they ask why the morale of Russian soldiers is so low. Today, Kremlin released a statement which prohibits Russian media to focus on how long this special military operation has been going on. So as you already know, this has been going on for 100 days so far, even though originally it was planned to be just maybe a couple of weeks. And I would say that every single person already realizes that this thing is not going in accordance with Russian plan. But at the same time, all the statements that Russia is releasing is basically saying that everything is going according to the plan. And so until recently you were able to say that this thing is going already for 3 months. But now once again you cannot purposefully focus on the timeline of this special military operation. And the reason why this is done is so that there is no contradiction between the actual timeline of this war and whatever Kremlin is telling you that's happening. You might already know that at this very moment there is a big problem with wheat supplies everywhere around the world. And the reason for this is because two biggest countries producers of wheat are Russia and Ukraine, which basically means that the supply of wheat around the world has decreased significantly. So there were several reports that Russia was stealing Ukrainian wheat so that they can use it as a blackmail in the future negotiations. And today basically this was exactly confirmed. The representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Maria Zakharova, said that Russia will deliver wheat to Western countries only in case these countries will remove sanctions from Russia. Which is like making statements like this. I have no idea how you want to be treated seriously in post-war times. But this is what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Russia says at this very moment, and unfortunately this is what the regular people of Russia will have to live with in the future. Surprise, surprise, the representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs, Josep Borrell, mentioned that the European Union will not recognize Russian passports that were issued on occupied Ukrainian territories. What he specifically meant in this case is that this activity of Russians trying to issue passports in the region of Kherson Kherson and Zaporozhye. In addition to that, all the future potential passports that will be maybe issued in the regions of Donbass region will also not be recognized, which basically means the people who live in these territories will not be able to travel abroad using these passports, which is basically the confirmation of exactly what I was saying in my past videos, is that no one else except Russia will recognize the independence of these regions. If you remember, a couple of days ago, the representatives of Ukrainian city of Mariupol and Russian city of St. Petersburg signed a deal which made these two cities to be so-called brotherly cities, which among other things means that the budget of St. Petersburg will be used towards post-war reconstruction of the city of Mariupol. And yes, you guessed it right, basically the regular Russians will be the ones who will be paying for this. But today, the mayor of Moscow, Sergei Sobyanin, arrived in Luhansk region, and the purpose of his visit is to sign the same deal with the regions of Luhansk and Donetsk, which basically means that Moscow and these regions will be from now on brotherly regions. And yes, it now also means that the budget of Moscow can be distributed towards these regions. And I mean, if I'll be Ukrainian in this case, I'll be maybe even relatively happy, because I know that Russia destroyed our cities and now they're reconstructing it and later we'll just take them back. So basically, thank you Russia in advance for doing this. Thank you so much for your attention, check the link in the description, stay safe and see you on Monday.